Torrin Wells, just an electric guitar. It looks like an open mic. He goes up on stage, he plugs in the guitar, he strums it, he sings, and the whole song is like him on stage, spotlight on him, looking a little bit a little bit uncomfortable, and the people in the crowd just kind of ignoring. You know what I'm saying? Like when you're in a social setting where there's live music, but it's not a concert, and people are just kind of like whatever. That's the music video. Yeah, but it fits the tone of the lyrics so well. I think it's like it doesn't matter if other people are appreciating it because he's not singing to them. Ultimately, he's singing to God. Which I think is pretty cool. So file that under yet one more YouTube Bible study that will start with a completely nonsensical opening. Welcome to Bible study. Good morning, class. How's everybody doing today? Are we all bright? Peachy. Yeah. Eventually, that's going to make it into our branding, to be on T-shirts and stuff, bumper stickers. Mission Liberty Hill, peachy. Ironically, I don't like peaches. It's not my deal. No, it tastes like eating a flower. I'm not into it. Eating a flower, it's like perfumey. I don't like it. I mean, it's cool if you like it, but just people can like different things, and that's okay. Great. You like peaches? Yeah. I can see it on your face, man. He's like, all the things Pastor's describing, that's good. I like that. They're peachy. Is everybody bright-eyed and bushy-tailed? Did you get that extra hour of sleep last night? Or did you have an extra hour of being awake last night because you knew you could? How about show of hands? Half an hour of extra sleep. Or hour of extra sleep. Hour of extra time. You woke up? That's how it goes. Well, we'll file that under hour of extra time. You just had it in the morning. Yeah? How about half an hour of each? Yeah. I stayed up more than an hour later than I should have. Welcome to being an adult where nobody comes and tells you to go to bed. Okay, let's get on track. We are studying the book of Genesis. I was thinking about this morning, and I'm interested in your thoughts. There's 50 chapters in Genesis. So we're on chapter 8, I think. We're less than sixth of the way through the book. I don't know that we have to go all the way through the end of chapter 50. We can, but we could also move on to other things at some point if you guys are feeling that. So just let me know. Well, we could do a survey of the rest, kind of speed through it. I definitely want to cover at least the Tower of Babel. I think that's important for us in our modern day. Weird to say, right? Because it's a very ancient story. But man, if we aren't building our own towers of Babel right now. But that'll be for another Bible study at another time. Yeah? Yeah. But if we want to go all the way through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Joseph, we can do that. I just kind of need a gauge that that's what we want to do. Because it's going to be a haul. And that's okay. We did all of Acts. We did all of Revelation. Between those two, that was like a year and a half worth of Bible study, I think, literally. So, okay. All right. Genesis. Heretofore. We looked at the story of creation and the story of the Garden of Eden in particular. Something I never really highlighted for you is that when we say Garden of Eden, I don't know what comes to your mind. Usually, I think of the whole world pre the fall into sin. I'm not sure that that's actually accurate. It seems like the Garden of Eden might have actually been a particularly special space. You know, like God made all the world and it was good and perfect, but the Garden of Eden was like crown jewel. To use a metaphor from later in Scripture, but actually it maybe is a good analogy. I kind of wonder if the world was, let's say, the temple, the dwelling place where God resides with his people, right? But the Garden of Eden was more like the Holy of Holies. You know? Like if you can remember the tabernacle or the temple, there's there's these outer courts, and you move towards this inner court, and then you have the holy place, right? The word we use for that would be sanctuary. You got the holy place, but then within the holy place there is the Holy of Holies, which is a Hebrew idiom, right? If you're the blank of this, if you're X of X's, it means you're the most X, right? So if you are the King of Kings, you are the kingest, right? And that makes sense because, right, you rule over the other kings, so that makes sense to you. But in French, we speak French. In French, they say the creme de la creme, right? What does that mean? The cream of the cream, right? What does that even mean? The cream of the cream? Well, it's the uppermost. It's the creamiest, right? So when we talk about the Holy of Holies, that sounds really funny to our ears. But sometimes you'll see it translated thusly, and it's not wrong. They'll call it the most holy place. Makes sense? So if you think of the whole world, free of the fall into sin, as sort of analogous to the temple, then maybe the Garden of Eden is like the holy place or the Holy of Holies, right? That's special. It's all perfect, but that space in particular is like the highest and best. Yeah? I'm sorry. I'm struggling because I've got a sneeze that's just, and maybe it'll taunt me for an hour, and you guys will just have to suffer through watching me go for an hour. I hope not. So anyways, God creates the world, and along with it, he creates the Garden of Eden, and that's where he puts Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve, part of creation, and at the same time, slightly set apart too, right? It is Adam and Eve are positioned as the parts of creation that God made with his very hands. The part of creation that God breathes his spirit into. The part of creation, and this is explicit, that God makes in his own image. He doesn't make the deer and the cows and the dandelions in his own image. It's important that we understand this stuff. There are pagan ideas, and as we have a rising immigrant population from India, you are probably starting to encounter more and more Hindus in your life. And if not, well, I hope you will soon, because they're here, and they sure could use some Christian friends. One of the ideas in Hinduism is that everyone is, or everything is, at some level, derived from the transcendent Godhead. They wouldn't use that term. They would call it the Brahman, right? But it's the highest spiritual existence, and we all participate in that. And so y'all know at the beginning and end of yoga class, they all say, Namaste, right? As I understand it, and look, I'm not a yogi, but as I understand it, what that means is something like, I bow to the God within you, right? Because the idea is we are all divine. And you could see how that might be like an attractive idea to make adjacent to Christianity. Because I will say to you, your body is a temple for the Holy Spirit. The Godhead dwells within you. Are we saying the same thing? No, we are not. They believe that everybody is divine. apart from whether God, sanctifies them or redeems them or anything like that. And this translates actually into all creatures, right? I mean, you probably have heard the idea of a sacred cow, right? Well, that's because cows are on this spectrum, right? And the idea of reincarnation that comes up in Hinduism suggests that you won't even just come back as a person necessarily. Animals are fair game, right? You might come back as a cow, for instance. So there's a very thin distinction there, if any at all, between people and animals. Does that make sense? Pagans can also have that sort of idea. You maybe know some pagans in your life. I'm not using that word pejoratively. I'm talking about people who self-identify as pagan, right? People who practice various kinds of Wicca or witchcraft or folk religions from Europe, whatever, right? Druidic, whatever. Many of them have this sort of pantheistic idea that that God dwells in everything, and thus everything can and should be worshipped. Make sense? So it comes out as like a worship of nature. And people with that perspective often grow a disdain for humans because humans act like we're not part of it. And we abuse the planet and the resources that are there, the animals and trees and whatever, right? And it's not that they don't have a point, because they do have a point. No Christian should take from God's telling Adam and Eve to have dominion over the planet as saying, go ruin the planet I made. The whole point was for them to cultivate life and fecundity and stuff, right? But the trees are not divine. The trees were not made in God's image. You were. So we should be able to have a distinction between those things. If you ever encounter, so there's various kinds of vegetarians and vegans and so forth, right? Some do it for health reasons, some do it for they just can't stand the idea of eating an animal, and that's fair enough. But there are also people who do moral equivocation. It's like, well, you had to take a life to eat that thing, and that's not right. You shouldn't have to take anyone's life, because they're equivocating human life and animal life. You get interesting answers if you ask them, well, what about the bear eating the fish? Is the bear immoral? The point being here, God makes humans distinct from the rest of the animals. We are close to them in many ways, but we're also different from them in some important ways. Adam and Eve eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. We've discussed this already. They, in that moment, discover something about themselves. What do they discover in the moment that they eat of the fruit? They're naked. What does naked mean? What does the word mean? If you define naked for me right now. Not clothed, right? What's that? Without clothing. That implies that they lack something. Before the fall into sin, did they lack anything? Did they have clothes? Well, they didn't. I mean, they didn't, right? Because they ate and they saw that they were naked, right? They didn't need clothes because clothes are for modesty at some level, right? But also protection, right? I do not recommend doing yard work in the buff, right? You're going to get bug bites. You're going to get sunburns, right? You're going to get maybe a visit by the police. Depends on how tall your fences are, right? So, yeah. But you know what I'm saying? Even though that's even your own private property, and maybe you maintain it well, it's just not a good idea, right? Because you're exposed and vulnerable. That wasn't a problem in a world that's not hostile. They realize they're naked, which means that they're vulnerable, which means that they're exposed. It means that they lack, which they didn't until the moment that they did. Right? So sin enters the world, and along with it are going to come all the problems that we have to shelter ourselves, both within houses, but also even in our garments, right? They are ushered out of the garden. Immediately, the next part of the story is that they have kids, Cain and Abel, and the very next thing we know is that they are already offering sacrifices to God. So they have this worship relationship with God. And Abel brings from his herds, and God is pleased with the sacrifice. Abel brings the best from his herds, and God is pleased with the sacrifice. Cain brings some of his crop, and God is not as pleased. But it doesn't look like God's angry. Cain's angry. And God says to Cain, look, if you know what the right thing is, if you do what's right, won't you be accepted? But as it stands, sin is crouching at your door, and it wants to devour you, but you got to master it. That's a call for Cain to do what? What is God inviting Cain to do? Give sacrificially. Or in a broader sense, I would say he's calling Cain to repent. Right? Rather than prioritizing himself, God is inviting Cain, stop doing that. Trust me. Give me your best. And you'll still be blessed. It's what you desire. But rather than heed the call to repentance, Cain adds sin upon sin, right? All right. Y'all know this stuff. We get the lineage from Cain. We get the lineage from Seth, who is the replacement son for Abel. And, well, that's what it is. Yeah. You ever watch any of the royal family dramas? You got to have the heir and a spare, right? You got to have the heir and a spare. Yeah, so probably Cain should have been the heir, right? He was the oldest. But, I don't even think they were thinking in those terms. They were just going to be two guys in life, Anyway, so we get both lineages, and we see a rapid increase in sophistication in technology. We already get instruments, we get tools, we get probably copper working at least, if not bronze. We get cities. It's all happening in a very short span. I mean, sociologists or archaeologists usually try to put these things on spans of tens of thousands of years or hundreds of thousands of years, but the way the story in the Bible is told, it's happening in a matter of hundreds of years. And while sophistication is going up, morality is going down, right? Everybody becomes selfish. And when you're selfish, the next obvious step is you become violent. And that's the way the world is described, that everyone is violent and life is hellish on earth. God looks at what he had made and his heart is broken over it. He said, I would rather put an end to this than let it continue. But there was one man that he saw who was righteous in his generation, and that man's name was Noah. So he says to Noah, we're going to start over. I'm going to flood the earth. Never mind that you don't understand what a flood is. Just trust me, it's happening. And I'm going to need you to build me a box, real big box, big enough, 3 floors high, room for all the animals. Oh, I'm going to bring you all the animals. Room for food for everybody for an undisclosed length of time. So Noah does. He builds this box, this ark, just the way God tells him to do it. And God brings a pair of every land or air creature to Noah. Noah ushers them onto the ark, along with 6 additional pairs for all the clean animals. So he brings them all onto the ark. He settles them down, and God closes the door. And what does Noah do? Probably, yeah, he waits. He's got no power in this situation. He just waits. Waters come from above, waters come from below. I have some, conspiracy theories, ideas about what's going on to the planet right now. That, if in fact it had never rained before, which is possible based on the text, but not demanded of you. You don't have to believe that, but it's possible based on the text. But it never rained before, then maybe the water is trapped up in the atmosphere in some way that it is not currently. We'll talk about that either today or next week. So waters come down from above in a big way. But waters also come up from below, which could be stores of water under the ground, could be. Or I'm wondering if this isn't a description of what happens as the tectonic plates break apart and the water rushes in and the world physically fractures. Could be. Not a matter of your salvation. I don't care what you think about it. I just think it's interesting. I do care what you think about it, but as a pastor, I'm giving you communion no matter what you think about it. Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah, dodge that bullet. Whew. So Noah's on the ark. How long does it rain for? 40 days and 40 nights. And the waters rise so high that you can't see anything. Water covers over the tops of the mountains and everything. 40 days and 40 nights is a long time to be stuck inside with all the animals. I wonder about, Japheth's wife. She gets to be locked in for 40 days and 40 nights. It's longer. Talk about it. With her in-laws and all the animals. Boy, can you imagine? Anyways, so the rains continue for 40 days and 40 nights, and it wipes out every living land and air creature that's out there. I haven't highlighted this before. I do, because I believe these are true stories about real people. I want you to consider this for a moment. All of the people inside that ark, I'm sure were very grateful to be in that ark. I'm absolutely sure they were. No matter how bad their neighbors were, could you imagine the experience of being inside that box while everyone around you is drowning? It's heartbreaking. Traumatic. We might also talk about that when we get to the text today or next week. All right, so for 40 days and 40 nights it rains. Eventually the rains stop. And that brings us up to chapter 8, which is where we covered some of last week. And I told you, maybe I didn't tell you, I wanted to go back and revisit the birds a little bit. Okay? Because it didn't dawn on me to think about what's up with ravens and doves and why, whatever, right? So we're going to talk about that. So we're going to double back a little bit. So God, we'll just start at verse 1. God remembered Noah and all the beasts and all the livestock that were with him in the ark. God made a wind blow over the earth, and the waters subsided. The fountains of the deep and the windows of heavens were closed. The rain from the heavens was restrained, and the waters receded from the earth continually. At the end of 150 days, the waters had abated. In the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, the ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. Imagine that. You've been floating and floating and floating for 5 months, and all of a sudden, ka-chunk, You ever been in a fender bender? You didn't, you weren't anticipating it? The whole ark with every creature in it just went on a mountain. And the waters continued to abate until the 10th month. In the 10th month, on the first day of the month, the tops of the mountains were seen. It's taken 10-ish months to just see anything. And what they see right now is the tops of the mountains. At the end of 40 days, Noah opened the window of the ark that he had made and sent forth a raven. And it went to and fro until the waters dried up from the earth. Then he sent forth a dove from him to see if the waters had subsided from the face of the ground. But the dove found no place to set her foot. So she returned to him to the ark, for the waters were still on the face of the whole earth. So he put out his hand and took her and brought her into the ark with him. He waited another 7 days, and again he sent forth the dove out of the ark. The dove came back to him in the evening, and behold, in her mouth was a freshly plucked olive leaf. So Noah knew that the waters had subsided from the earth. All right, raven, dove. Picture them in your mind. What's the first thing that pops in your head? Black and white. They're sort of set up as contrasts or opposites almost, right? Ravens are wicked smart, They're like really smart. When he sends out the raven, it never actually returns to him. It just keeps flying around, and maybe it perches on the ark or whatever, but when he sends out the dove, it actually comes back to him. Ravens are, as far as I understand, carrion feeders, which means that the raven probably had plenty to eat, even if things were floating in the waters. So while the raven was more clever, not nearly as helpful. So rather than sending out the other raven and then having no ravens, Noah sends out a dove. And of course, he would have had 7 pairs of doves, probably, right? Because it's amongst the clean animals. Sends out the dove, and the dove's more helpful. Maybe it's not as clever, but it goes out and it returns to him. And because it is primarily an herbivore, I know they do eat little bugs and stuff occasionally, but it likes to eat seeds and that sort of thing. It provides a lot better information to him. Is there, a spiritual takeaway in that? I don't know. Maybe something like the clever but unclean way doesn't reveal the truth that God has for you. But I don't know. Maybe I'm over spiritualizing it. I just thought it was fascinating. So he sent the dove out, nothing. Sent the dove out again, it brought back an olive leaf or possibly olive branch. Hebrew is a different language. And so semantic range means that very rarely is there a strict one-for-one, this word means this. Where did Jesus get the nails? Can you point out where Jesus was nailed to the cross in your body? His hand, right? But actually the word translated hand really encompasses anything from here to there. And probably historical evidence suggests there's probably something more like this. These are good, strong bones that'll hold a person. These will probably tear through. But he says hand in our English translation, so we think that, But I'm not doubting the text. I'm saying that the word actually means more than just that. It means that. Olive branch, olive leaf. We have adopted the symbol of an olive branch as a symbol for, what does an olive branch symbolize in our culture these days? Peace. And it comes from this story, right? Why would we say that it's a symbol of peace? Everything's peaceful. Yeah, but usually we don't use it as a symbol for peace in the sense of quiet. Usually mean it in the sense of like what? Yeah. So what's the conflict here? I tell you what, let's put a pin in it. Let's come back to it here in a minute. But keep that in mind. We are talking about peace as an end of conflict or an end of war. All right. Also, from a practical standpoint, an olive is a fruit-bearing tree. You can eat olives, right? So this is a good sign to Noah that we're getting close to starting over again, right? Right. Yeah. So this means that the birds got lower to the ground and found that there was life lower to the ground, right? Good, good, good. He waited for another 7 days and sent forth the dove, and she did not return to him anymore. What does that mean? Yeah, she went and nested. That's right. In the 601st year, in the first month, on the first day of the month, the waters were dried from off the earth. Noah removed the covering of the ark and looked, and behold, the face of the ground was dry. They didn't get out of the ark yet. In the second month, on the 27th day of the month, the earth had dried out. Then God said to Noah, "Go out from the ark, you and your wife, and your sons' wives with you." Now, I think it's clear that Noah was getting antsy. He wanted to leave the ark. Why he's sending these birds out, right? And even though it looks ready to him, he still waits until what? Until God tells him to go. And I think this is the kind of thing that made Noah righteous in his generation. Because even though he had his own mind and he could have gone his own way, he, as it described him before the flood, walks with God, not ahead of God. How long have they been in the ark? 1 year and 10 days. Flood started in the 600th year of the first month, on the 17th day. Sorry, 600th year, second month, 17th day is when it started. This is 1 year later, second month, 27th day. 1 year and 10 days they've been on this ark. Yeah. What's that? I don't know, man. I don't know. See, here's the thing, right? Here's the thing that we should really kind of meditate on. How'd they make it? Like, do we really think he fit all of the animals plus all of the food that all of those animals would need for a year on the ark? How much space would that take? How much resources would that take? Was Noah farming all this time as well as building the ark? Like, the answer here is got to be something like this. God was in the ark with them. Maybe they did sleep a lot. You know? Maybe he shut the mouths of the lions like Daniel in the lion's den. What's up? I mean, maybe kind of, right? You know, we just aren't told about what goes on in the ark, but I don't want to gloss over it exactly. Because whatever answer you come up with, it probably should land with, this would have been impossible if not for God. And if a secular scholar reading the story goes, how charming, we can tell it's not true because, Well, yeah, if you're going to discount the miraculous, then you're right. But I think God's doing all kinds of miracles that might seem mundane to us if we don't stop and think about it. I don't know how long you could stay with your in-laws before somebody died, right? I have really nice ones. I like them, but not everybody has that. All right, moving along. So God commands them to go out from the ark, and he continues by saying, Bring out with you every living thing that is with you of all flesh, birds and animals and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth, that they may swarm on the earth and be fruitful and multiply on the earth. Does that sound familiar? What does it remind you of? The beginning. Yeah. So we're having a fresh start, right? And God's kind of pointing toward things have gone off the rails. I'm going to put them back on track. That was not a mixed metaphor. I used a nice, consistent metaphor there. All right. So Noah went out, and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives with him, every beast, every creeping thing, and every bird, everything that moves on the earth went out by families from the ark. And isn't that charming? Which is also kind of interesting because, there's a lot of creatures that aren't familial. They're like snakes. You're not going to, find a snake family cuddling up on the couch watching sitcoms. Snakes aren't like that. But at least until the multiplying starts happening, God's kind of holding them together. Verse 20. Then Noah built an ark to the Lord. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord and took some of every clean animal, some of every clean bird, and offered burnt offerings on the altar. Now, you might think that this is irresponsible because there are so few animals. You got to give them the best shot they can. But it's not irresponsible. It is faithful. Noah shows his gratitude to God. He shows his trust to God. And we are back to worshiping God the way that was most pleasing to him back in Genesis chapter 3. And when the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma, the Lord said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground because of man. For the intention of a man's heart is evil from his youth. Neither will I ever again strike down every living creature as I have done. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. I want you to notice that God is not promising that he will not destroy the world. What he's saying is, as long as the earth persists, I will not interrupt the natural procession of things. So this is important because we do have an eschatological view that God actually will destroy the world at some point, right? He's going to destroy the world as it is, make a new heavens and a new earth, right? Because this earth, even post-flood, as you well know, is still plagued by the curse of sin. But God is saying, I'm no longer going to visit punishment for sin upon the whole earth. Man will be accountable strictly, right? Let's keep going. Chapter 9. And God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Great. Now, check this out. The fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth, upon every bird of the heavens, upon everything that creeps on the ground and all the fish of the sea. Into your hand they are delivered. We'll come a little bit to why that will be in a second, but I just want you to hold that when Adam's in the Garden of Eden, what's the first story we get about Adam and the animals? Adam has a job. He names the animals. So God brings the animals to Adam. He names them, right? So they are all attracted to him. Think about Noah right before the flood. Does he get in his like Hemi, like truck and go drive around rustling the cattle and stuff? Where did all the animals come from? God draws them to Noah. So the picture here is that the animals are coming to. But now, the animals will be fleeing. The animals will, in their nature, be fearful of man. And this is, a continuation of the effects of sin, right? But let's keep going into chapter 9, verse 3. Every moving thing that lives shall be food for you. As I have given you the green plants, I give you everything. But you shall not eat the flesh with its life, that is, its blood. Okay. So, I want you to note something here. Going back as far as Cain and Abel, we know that there was this idea of, killing from the herds and offering it as a sacrifice. And certainly when it comes time for Noah, we get this distinction of clean and unclean animals, right? Because he's supposed to get 7 pairs of the clean animals. And if you have a passing familiarity with the Old Testament, you'll know, that's right, because the Jewish people are allowed to eat the clean animals, and they're not allowed to eat the unclean animals, right? But 9 verse 3, every moving thing that lives shall be food for you. As I gave you the green plants, I give you everything. This would suggest to us that they weren't allowed to eat animals until right now. So the distinction between clean and unclean animals up until this point had nothing to do with what they were allowed to eat. What do you think it was about? Sacrifices they offered. So it was a week or two ago that I asked you, why bring 7 pairs onto the altar? And I think it was Mike who said, for sacrifice. And this would seem to suggest he was right. But now, we do have this distinction between clean and unclean animals. Which animals are Noah and his sons and their families permitted to eat, according to the text? All of them. Yeah. So you're telling me that Noah was allowed to eat pork and shrimp? It's part of everything. Yeah. So, well, that's true. He didn't have a microwave. Yeah. So when we think about food purity laws, which will come up, right? They're particularly going to come up. Do you know where in the Bible they're going to come up? Like when in history? When are all the food purity laws going to come up for the Jewish people? What's that? Yeah, I mean, basically this is when the Israelites are in the wilderness and God is giving the law to Moses. Well, we've got a whole lot of history between here and there. Right? So when the Egyptians were, let's say, living in Egypt under the pharaohs, they had no idea of kosher. They weren't bound to that. I bring this up just so that you'll understand that those laws aren't necessarily ethical standards that need to be applied to every culture and every place and time. Some are, right? Like the prohibition of murder, that's just everybody, right? but something like can't eat shellfish. God's giving permission to Noah to eat that stuff, right? And this will happen again for Peter in the New Testament. I just raise this for you because it's important that you understand that not everything that is given as a law to Israel is meant to be a matter of morality and an enduring law for all cultures. Right? Does this make sense to you? So we can press into that more later on. But most of us don't have an issue wearing garments made of mixed fabrics. And a cynical person who doesn't really believe in the Bible would call you a hypocrite because it's forbidden in Deuteronomy. Right? Okay, that's a very shallow and immature way of reading it. So passages like this kind of help show that, no, there are some distinctions to be made here. All right. What is the one food purity law that God gives right away? Should be right there in front of you. What's that? Blood, right. Yeah. So you can't eat the meat while there's still blood in it. Why do you suppose? Why do you suppose he gave that law? Pure, in what sense? Like spiritually? Yeah. I would suggest that this is probably more about health. Making sure we're not passing on bloodborne diseases and stuff like that. So this isn't necessarily even a moral law. It's just a safeguard. And I think a lot of the food laws that will come up later on are for the same purpose. Well, that as well, right? So there is probably an anti-cruelty measure here as well. It's probably both and. And then there is also going to be a sort of a symbolic bit to it as well, because he's going to continue on from there. It says, don't eat the flesh while it has its lifeblood. And he's going to go on to talk about blood, right? Verse 5. And for your lifeblood, I will require a reckoning. From every beast I will require it, and from man. From his fellow man I will require a reckoning for the life of a man. Whoever sheds the blood of a man, by man shall his blood be shed. For God made man in his own image. And you be fruitful and multiply and increase greatly on the earth. Multiply it. So again, we see God sets this distinction between mankind and animals. And as part of his dominion over the animals, Noah is given to responsibly eat from the things that live. I think there is an idea there about humanely as well. But if man was just another animal, then the life of a man would be as cheap as the life of an animal. God says, no. If anybody takes the life of a human, their life will be demanded of them. Even if it's a wild beast, which I find fascinating, right? Because we don't normally think about wild beasts as being moral or immoral. God says, no, I mean, even if a wild beast kills a man, they'll have to lose their life because of that. What is the instrument that God uses to take the life? Right? So if one man kills another man, how does the murderer die? What's up? Well, yeah, I'm saying who does the killing, basically. Yeah. It's in the text. Verse 6, whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. So is God saying, if you kill someone, I will kill you? That's right. This is sort of the seed from which the principle of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth will come. And that We are not required to demand an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, right? However, it is a basic definition of what justice is, and it's an upper limit on what anybody should require. So if Donnie steals $50 from me, I can't demand $70 back from him. I can demand $50 back from him. I can't make a profit off of him doing crime, right? If his negligence, let me make myself, I'll make myself the bad guy here. If my negligence results in Donnie losing an eye, he can sue me for what the established value of his eye is. But he can't sue me for the established value of his life. Does this make sense? And this is how it works. Like usually you wouldn't actually pluck somebody's eye out in retribution. It would have been a repayment of equivocal value. Sorry? Yeah, if it worked like that, maybe, right? Like if we had interchangeable parts, maybe you could do that. If we were all Mr. Potato Head. But it doesn't work like that. So God is sort of laying a foundation for that way of thinking, which is to say, if somebody visits mortal violence upon another man, then their life will be demanded of them as well. Why? Because God made man in his own image. This whole thing is not about an encouragement to kill or to kill in retribution. This whole thing is about how sacred human life is. And so do not take lightly the life of anyone else, because their life is not worth less than yours. You must value everyone's life, because mankind, this is a non-gendered statement here, mankind is made in the image of God. And we ought to value human life accordingly. I think that's probably a good place to stop for now. So we'll pick up at 9 verse 8. Next week, God willing. Thank you for coming on this ride with me. We didn't quite get to the rainbow. We'll get to the rainbow next week. That'll be fun. Anyways, we got church coming up in about 5 minutes and 51 seconds. So go freshen up your coffee and come on back.